Familiarity breeds contempt. The phrase is old, but most people misunderstand what it really means. Because people rarely wake up one day and decide to disrespect you. It does not begin with open disregard. It begins quietly, in small moments. A delayed reply that once would have come instantly. A thank you that slowly disappears. Plans that become easier to cancel. At first, nothing feels dramatic. In fact, it often feels normal. You might even tell yourself you are imagining it, that nothing has really changed, but something has. And there's a very specific psychological moment when appreciation begins turning into assumption. Most people never notice when this moment happens. Only later do they feel the result of it, because the shift does not happen in the other person first. It happens in the dynamic. And once that dynamic changes, people begin treating you differently without even realizing why. But to understand that moment, we need to look at how respect actually forms between people. In the beginning of any relationship, whether it's friendship, work, or romance, there is uncertainty. And uncertainty creates attention. People observe you. They notice how you speak, how you respond, how available you are, how much access they have to your time. At this stage, your presence still has weight, not because you're doing something special, but because you are not yet predictable. Your time still feels valuable. And when something feels valuable, people handle it carefully. They show appreciation. They show effort. But slowly, something begins to change. And most of the time, the change comes from a place that looks generous. You begin giving more. You become more available. You respond faster. You accommodate more. You make yourself easier to reach, easier to rely on, easier to access. At first, this seems like kindness. It seems like connection. And sometimes it is. But there's a moment, subtle and almost invisible, when your availability stops being appreciated and starts being expected. This is the moment most people miss. Because nothing dramatic happens. There is no argument, no confrontation, just a small psychological shift. The other person stops wondering if you will show up. They begin assuming you will. An assumption quietly removes appreciation. This is where the dynamic begins to change. You may have experienced this without realizing it. In the beginning, someone thanks you for helping them. Later, they simply expect your help. In the beginning, they are excited to hear from you. Later, they respond whenever it is convenient. In the beginning, your time feels like a gift. Later, it feels like a given. And here is the part most people misunderstand. This shift is rarely intentional. Most people are not consciously deciding to value you less. They are simply adapting to the pattern you have created. Human behavior is extremely responsive to patterns. When something becomes consistent, the brain stops treating it as special. It becomes normal, predictable, guaranteed. And once something feels guaranteed, the urgency around it disappears. This is why the moment someone begins taking you for granted is not when they disrespect you. It is when they stop feeling the possibility of losing access to you. Respect is closely tied to perceived scarcity, not artificial scarcity, but psychological uncertainty. When people know your time has boundaries, they treat it differently. When they know your attention is selective, they appreciate it more. But when access becomes unlimited, the mind stops assigning value to it. This is not cruelty. It is human psychology. And this is where the deeper pattern becomes visible. Many people unintentionally train others to take them for granted, not through weakness, but through overcompensation. They give more than necessary. They remove their own boundaries. They make themselves constantly available in order to maintain closeness. But closeness built on unlimited access slowly erodes respect, because respect requires structure. Without structure, relationships lose their natural balance. Think about the early stages of any connection. There are natural pauses. People wait for responses. They wonder when they will see each other again. There is space, and that space keeps appreciation alive. But when that space disappears completely, the emotional rhythm collapses. Everything becomes immediate. Everything becomes expected. And expectation quietly replaces gratitude. This is a psychological moment when someone starts taking you for granted, not when they cross a boundary, but when they stop noticing the value of what you give, because it has become normal. But there is another layer to this dynamic that is even more important, and this is where things begin to change. When people feel taken for granted, their instinct is usually to give more. They try harder. They become even more available. They offer more support, more patience, more understanding. They hope that increasing their effort will restore the appreciation that used to exist. But this almost always produces the opposite effect, because increased availability does not restore value. It reinforces expectation, and expectation rarely creates respect. Respect is shaped by boundaries, not distance, not coldness, but clarity. Clarity about what your time means. Clarity about what access to you requires. Clarity about where your limits exist. When those limits disappear, people unconsciously recalibrate how they treat you. Again, not from malice, but from adaptation. This is why some people seem consistently respected in their relationships, not because they are demanding, but because their presence is structured. Their time is not endlessly flexible. Their attention is not automatic, and that subtle structure communicates something powerful. It communicates self-value, and people tend to mirror the value you place on yourself. This is the deeper psychological truth behind being taken for granted. It is not just about how others behave. It is about the dynamic you allow to form, the patterns you reinforce, the expectations that slowly develop around your presence. But the important realization is this: dynamics can change. The moment appreciation turned into assumption may have been subtle, but awareness of that moment gives you something important: choice. Because the way you respond to being taken for granted determines whether the pattern continues. Sometimes the change is surprisingly simple. A boundary that was never stated. A pause where you used to rush. A moment where you allow someone else to meet you halfway. These small shifts reintroduce something that had disappeared: space. And space restores perception. When access is no longer automatic, attention returns. People begin noticing again, not because you demanded respect, but because the dynamic once again contains balance. And balance is where respect naturally grows. So, if you have ever felt that strange transition in a relationship, that quiet moment when appreciation slowly faded, it may not have started with disrespect. It may have started with a pattern of availability, a pattern of access, a pattern that slowly removed the sense that your time, attention, and presence were valuable. But the moment you recognize that pattern, something changes. You begin to see the dynamic clearly. And once you see it, you can reshape it. Because respect is rarely something people simply give. It is something that forms through the structure of the relationship itself. And often, the smallest changes in that structure create the biggest shifts in how people treat you. So here is something worth reflecting on. When you look back at your own relationships, can you identify the moment when appreciation quietly turned into assumption? Subscribe for emotional clarity.